Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to Audiobook Dynasty. If you want early access and even more parts for free, make sure to join me on Patreon. As the flash of the magic circle faded, I slowly opened my eyes and found myself back in the Occult Research Club room. The familiarity of the surroundings gave me an immediate sense of relief. The walls filled with books, the large windows, the antique furniture, it all made me feel at home again, even though this wasn't my first home. Suddenly, I felt a friendly touch on my back. You did well, Leonard, Kiba said, as a kind of tacit approval. The fight against Razor Phoenix was really one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. I'm serious. I turned to look at him and saw all the other members of the Occult Research Club as well. Anyway, you're still our Leonard. Welcome back, buddy, Kiba said with his hand still on my shoulder. Before I could answer and greet Rias, Akeno, and Asia, Konako, who was sitting at the window, stood up. Her feline eyes were fixed on me. You surprised us, Leonard. Not only with your strength, but also with your determination. You're much stronger than you look. I want to test your strength against mine one day. A bead of sweat ran down my forehead. I don't know how good I would be against you. Kiba gave a short laugh, laughing at my slight fear of Konako's strength. If Konako can do it, I think we should have a duel for training, Leonard. Let him rest, guys, Akeno said, walking past Konako and then Kiba. Before I could realize it, Akeno wrapped me in a warm embrace. The softness of her generous breasts warmed my heart, and I felt the softness of her hair against my face. I'm so glad you came back to me in one piece. Akeno murmured into my right ear. Behind Akeno and in front of me, I saw surprise in the eyes of Rias and Asia. But they didn't look jealous, just surprised, as if they had just realized that there was something more between Akeno and me. I was only able to do this because of your example of strength and the support of the others. It was a hard fight, but you did well. Congratulations. I wrapped my arms around Akeno and returned the hug. Thank you, Akeno. Rias snorted quietly, interrupting the moment. Come. Leo, how was your conversation with my brother? Your brother? I thought, remembering the tense encounter with Surtsk's Lucifer. He said that everything will be fine. There won't be any severe punishment for me, but I will be under observation. He wants me to learn more about the demon world. Rias, arms crossed, nodded understandingly with a look of relief on her face. I'm very glad to hear that. Things could have been a lot worse. She made an elegant gesture with her hand and her familiar, a bat, appeared with a pile of requests for services. Now, let's get down to business. Things should be quiet for a while, and we have a lot of work to do. We must now focus on our responsibilities as the devils of this city. Rias' familiar landed on the table, scattering the papers. Rias began picking some up and analyzing them to distribute the requests to each of us, explaining the details of each mission. Asia, you and I will take an exorcism request. Exorcism? Asia asked. Isn't that something only church people do? No, we also have some exorcism services. But we're not exorcising a devil, we're exorcising an evil spirit. I'm relying on your experience as a nun. Right. I'll do my best. Kiba, you have an escort mission. Konako, there's a search request in a nearby forest. Akeno, you and Leo will handle a protection order. Protection? What exactly do we have to protect? I asked. It is believed that a famous collector in the city may be the target of a rebellious devil seeking power. This collector keeps many powerful items, so it's impossible to say which item might be stolen. The collector in question is unconcerned, and I truly believe that Akeno or you could handle this job alone, but something doesn't smell right to me, so I'm sending you two as a guarantee. Isn't that great? Akeno hugged me again. We'll do our best on this mission, Leo. There was a slight blush on her face that almost told me what she had in mind. Rias looked at both of us and smiled briefly at the corner of her mouth before continuing. Before we split up for the missions, I'd like to talk to you about another matter. I've noticed that we're all a little tense because of recent events. A club trip might be just what we need to relax and strengthen our bonds. Everyone's eyes lit up at the idea. We can choose from 3 destinations: hot springs, the mountains, or the beach. Internally, I immediately began to ponder which of these options would put me in the most romantic setting. A trip to the hot springs was a classic, and I'd never been there myself. I had the hotel rooms, the communal baths and everything. Going to the mountains would also be an excellent choice, because we could play the classic game of chicken in the woods, and then one girl would run around clutching her arms to me. And the beach, well, the beach would allow me to see them all in tight bikinis. Just imagining it was enough to make me very excited. Akeno, what's your choice? Asked Rias. Akeno looked at me out of the corner of her eye. I vote for the hot springs. A nice hot bath would be wonderful to relax our bodies. Asia. I'd like to go to the beach, Asia said shyly. Rias was a little surprised, considering Asia was a nun. Oh, really? Yet, I've never been to the beach before and I think it would be fun to do it with friends. Konako. The little white-haired girl thought for a moment before answering. The mountains. I like the fresh air. Kiba. I agree with Asia. The beach seems like a good choice for relaxation. And then Rias turned to me. What about you, Leo? I choose the beach, I said smiling. It looks like the perfect place to relax. Well, it looks like the beach has won. But what about you, Bucko? Akeno asked. Which one do you choose? I'm the one who gave you the options, and I like them all. I was worried about leaving the options open and everyone choosing different places. We'll start planning the trip as soon as we finish the missions. You're dismissed for the day. Asterisk. They sent 2 of you? That's surprising, the middle-aged man said after opening the door to his mansion and seeing Akeno and me. Doesn't that girl, Gremory, think that's a bit much? The man in front of us was a strange figure from Kua town. His name was Mr. Tanaka. Despite his advanced age, he had an erect, dignified posture that reminded me of Batman's Alfred. His face, lined with wrinkles, showed an expression of almost annoyance. He wore a dark silk robe that looked like it belonged to a bygone era, but was still in excellent condition, and gave off a faint scent of tobacco. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Tanaka. We'll be at your disposal this evening. Mr. Tanaka sighed and stepped back to allow us to enter the mansion. Since you really came, come in, come in. Let's have a little chat in the living room. Akeno and I exchanged a quick glance before following the old collector. The mansion was as impressive on the inside as it was on the outside. The main hall was filled with beautiful paintings on the walls, and the floor was pure polished marble. The room was silent except for the sound of our footsteps. When we reached the living room, I noticed that some objects were displayed in glass cases, protected and carefully organized. Among these objects were metal bowls, daggers, and even the small bones of strange creatures. Please have a seat, Mr. Tanaka said, pointing to an old leather sofa. Akeno sat gracefully beside me, her hands elegantly resting in her lap. She managed to maintain an enviable poise and was always calm. I tried to be as well behaved as she was, but it was impossible. My hands rested on my knees to keep her calm. This kind of chic atmosphere was much more than I was used to. Ms. Gremory told me there was a suspicion of theft from my collection, but I repeat, that is impossible. So what exactly brings you here? Asked Mr. Tanaka, squinting to assess us. Is she doing this because she wants to acquire an item of mine? If so, I only sell at an organized auction and through a trusted auctioneer. If she wants something that belongs to me, she must show her determination publicly. What are you talking about? I asked, slightly irritated by his manner. We are only here to ensure that your collection does not become the target of undesirable forces, Akeno replied. Mr. Tanaka frowned and let out a dry laugh. My collection? I don't know who's spreading these rumors in the underworld, but they seem rather exaggerated. This is Japan. There's no theft here. Mr. Tanaka, with all due respect, some of your relics have immeasurable value for certain people. Not only monetary value but also supernatural value, Akeno replied. Mr. Tanaka sighed and leaned back in his chair, crossing his hands over his stomach. You differ from the other boy who came here. That blonde guy was much more understanding, he murmured, almost to himself. Akeno and I exchanged a quick look. Mr. Tanaka was a very stubborn kind of customer. We're here to help, not to cause trouble. Your collection is fascinating and deserves to be protected. I replied, looking him in the eye to give him the confidence he needed. Before the man could answer, a figure appeared in the doorway. A woman of Tanaka's age, with a kind face and grey hair. She was wearing a simple but elegant dress and seemed surprisingly confused as she looked at us. Ah, you must be Mrs. Tanaka, Akeno said, standing up to greet the woman. It's a pleasure to meet you. Are they? She looked at her husband and asked. Yes. Mr. Tanaka nodded. Welcome to our home. I hope you're comfortable. This time, she approached with a smile. My husband didn't tell me you were coming. I must admit, I'm surprised to see you so normal. Thanks. I replied. This is probably her first time seeing devils. Honey, what about the party? The guests are about to arrive. Party? There was no mention of a party. Party? Akeno asked. Oh, it's not really a party, Mr. Tanaka clarified, laughing nervously. Just a book club meeting. My wife and I get some friends together every Saturday to discuss literature and artifacts. Nothing big. Yes, it's something we've been doing for years, Mrs. Tanaka added with a faint smile. But don't worry, you don't have to attend. I have a room for you to rest in. You can stay there while we go about our business. Akeno and I thought it was a sick joke by the Tanakas, but they led us to a solid wooden door. When Mrs. Tanaka opened the door, there was indeed a room on the other side. The room was large and even had doors leading to a balcony. The walls were a soft cream color, decorated with 2 paintings of serene rural landscapes. In the middle of the room was a large double bed, covered with a red silk bedspread and golden pillows. "I beg your pardon," Mrs. Tanaka said, her eyes almost closed. "This is the only guest room available at the moment. The others are being renovated. Collections like mine need a lot of care and space," said Mr. Tanaka. "I hope you don't mind sharing a bed." Akeno and I looked at each other again, this time with a little embarrassment. I could feel my cheeks heating up slightly, but I forced a smile. "Fufu, no problem," Akeno said with a closed smile. "We're here to help, and a minor discomfort is part of the job." Suddenly, the doorbell of the mansion rang. "Tindum. Oh, you must be our guests. Thank you for your understanding, children. Please make yourselves at home," said Mr. Tanaka. With these words, they left the room, closing the door behind them. The silence that followed was disconcerting for a moment. I looked around, but there was nothing to start a conversation with. "Well," Akeno said, breaking the silence. "I've never shared a room with a man before." "Well," Akeno said, breaking the silence. "I've never shared a room with a man before." "Really? That's nice." I replied and then thought, how nice? "Why did you say nice, you idiot?" Akeno and I, alone, in a guest room with a single bed. Of course, my mind immediately started traveling through memories of our past moments, like our first kiss and that morning in the bathroom. Her facial expressions, the whispering in the bathroom stall, and even the moaning came to mind. I looked at Akeno, trying to decipher her thoughts, but her face was calm. Could it be that she wasn't angry with me? Since the time I lost a heart to her, nothing had happened between us. In my mind, it was logical to think that she was still angry. My hands began to sweat, and I began to walk around the room to distract my agitated mind. Why was I so nervous? Was it because I was with Akeno or because I wasn't sure how to act in such a situation? Akeno sat on the edge of the bed and watched me with interest. "You seem restless, Leo. Is something bothering you? How can I explain my feelings without sounding ridiculous?" I thought. I just hadn't realized that I was already acting ridiculous, and the fear of ruining everything was what was getting to me. "I'm just thinking about all this. Our mission here, you know, Mr. Tanaka's collection and all the rest." Akeno gave a small, almost wistful smile. "You really are a bad liar, aren't you, Leo?" What do you mean?" "Nothing. Forget what I said." I sighed, ran a hand through my hair and decided to be direct. "Akeno, I have to say it. Ever since that day in the familiar forest, I've had the feeling that something has changed between us. I don't know if you're still angry with me or if you've forgiven me." Akeno got up from the bed and took a few steps towards me. She stopped a few centimeters away from me and looked me straight in the eyes with her hands behind her back. Leo, I'm not mad at you." "What?" Of course, I felt a little jealous at the time, but then I understood the situation. "I think it's kind of fun that you have other suitors. But right now, I'm just worried." My eyebrows raised when I heard those words. "Worried about what?" "I see the way you look at Rias and the way she looks at you. I would never ask to be your official wife. In fact, I think it's much more fun for me to be a concubine. But I don't want to be a stumbling block for you and Rias." Feeling the need to close the distance between us, I moved closer. "Akeno, you'll never be in anyone's way, least of all mine. You're important to me. From the beginning, since I joined the Occult Research Club, you've always been there, supporting me, helping me to develop. Today, I'm a little less bad and more confident because of you. So what made you become so distant and not show that you have feelings for me like you used to with your eyes since you first saw me, Leo?" I swallowed. I had stopped looking at her with all that desire before because I was afraid of making her angrier. I was afraid of hurting you, of losing you. After what happened in the familiar forest, I thought I had lost your trust and I couldn't risk losing more." Akeno took a step towards me and her hands reached out to clasp mine. "Leo, the important thing is, do you still want me? Do you still see a future for us, even with Rias?" My heart leapt, and my eyes showed determination. "Yes, Akeno. I want you. I always have and I always will. If Rias objects in the future, I'll do my best to convince her otherwise." "You obtained 3 heart with Akeno Himejima." A genuine smile spread across Akeno's face. That's all I needed to hear. She leaned forward, and I smelled her soft lavender scent. Her lips touched mine in a kiss. It was as if all the weight of the insecurities and fears between us dissolved in that moment. When we pulled away, her arms were still wrapped around my neck. "Well, what do you say we lie down for a while? It's a little chilly in here," she suggested with a bit of shyness and boldness. "Lie down? During a mission? Even during a mission, we have to take advantage of opportunities. Don't you think?" Akeno went over to the bed and sat down under the blanket, patting the place next to her lightly. Come on, Leo. It's warm in here. If you do as I ask, I promise I'll make it up to you. Without hesitation, I lay down next to her. Her warmth was unique. At that moment, a system message appeared in front of my eyes. New system challenge. Challenge name, is the Thunder Priestess Indomitable? Difficulty level C. Description, you are lying in a double bed with Akeno Himejima. There is no one around for 20 meters. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka are in the great hall downstairs, listening to loud classical music and chatting with a dozen guests. There is nothing to stop you and Akeno from going all the way. Challenge goal, take Akeno Himejima's virginity. Deadline, tonight. Rewards. +1 mysterious skill. +10 to all mental and physical attributes. I cuddled up next to Akeno on the bed, feeling the warmth of her body radiating through the blanket we shared. The silence between us was somehow comfortable. My heart was still pounding from the few seconds of kissing. Besides, it was the first time I'd seen Akeno without her ponytail. Her loose black hair made her look even more beautiful. While my mind wandered, Akeno's hand found mine under the blanket. Her thin fingers intertwined with mine. It was as if all the barriers I had built for myself had finally crumbled. Leo, I'm still a little cold. Akeno said suddenly, her eyes half closed. I smiled, a genuine smile that reflected the happiness I felt. She wanted the same as I did. Come here, I murmured and held out my arms to her. Akeno didn't hesitate. She cuddled up to me. To feel Akeno so close, her whole body nestled against mine, was an indescribable sensation. Her lavender scent was intoxicating. Is that better? I whispered into her ear. Akeno nodded, her head resting on my chest. Much better. She murmured. You see, Akeno. You're incredibly beautiful like this, with your hair down. She lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes shining in the darkness of the room. Do you really think so? She asked with a big blush on her cheeks. Yes, I do. You're beautiful anyway, but like this, it's like I'm seeing a side of you that no one else sees. It's special to me. Akeno looked away, obviously embarrassed. Don't talk nonsense. Then she turned her back to me, obviously trying to hide her blush. I smiled and hugged her tighter from behind. This is worse, you know. I whispered in her ear. Because when you have your back to me, I can show you how beautiful I think you are in a different way. My desire for her was palpable, and the bulge in my pants pressed against her ass in a way that made it clear what I wanted. Akeno. Do you want to do this? Fufu, I was waiting for you to ask. She turned to me again, her eyes meeting mine, and my heart leapt. There was so much longing and tenderness in her eyes. Akeno moved closer, and we began to kiss. My heart was pounding uncontrollably, and I bet hers was, too. Suddenly, Akeno broke the kiss and pulled her lips away from mine with a mischievous smile. She looked into my eyes and began to stroke my chest with one of her fingers. Leo, I want to give you something special, something you'll never forget. My curiosity was immediately piqued. What is it? Akeno smiled and leaned forward. Just trust me. She murmured, brushing her lips against my right ear as she lifted the blanket a little. Shivering, I swallowed and nodded without thinking. But you have to promise not to look. I promise. Akeno pulled away slightly, her fingers sliding down my chest as she slowly slid under the blanket. My desire for her burned, and every fiber of my being yearned for her. Remember, don't peek. I won't peek. You don't have to worry, I promised again. The blanket lifted slightly as Akeno hid under it. Her body disappeared from my view. I felt a chill when I heard the sound of my pants zipper being unzipped slowly. A few moments later, I felt the touch of her fingers on my cock and then Akeno's soft, warm lips enveloping it. Oh, Akeno. Her movements with her mouth were slow, as if she was enjoying every moment as much as I was. The sensation of her tongue sliding around my cock, exploring every inch, was wonderful. She picked up the pace, and the pleasure grew steadily. Your cock is huge, Leo. It almost doesn't fit in my mouth. She said as she licked me like a popsicle. Leo, are you enjoying this? Yes, very much. I replied, trying to control my breathing as the pleasure threatened to overwhelm me. Arara. She made a deep, melodious sound. I will make you remember this night forever. I couldn't tell if it was because this was no longer Akeno's first time, or if it was because I couldn't see what she was doing under the covers, but her blowjob was much better than the one I'd had in the ladies' room. My muscles tensed, and I knew I was close. Akeno, I'm almost there. At that moment, she stopped and held my cock tightly. Soon her head popped out of the cover and she smiled. Don't you dare to come now. Today I want it all inside me. Chapter 50, Tight Walls, R18. Don't you dare come now. Today, I want you inside me. Akeno smiled mischievously. She climbed all the way on top of me, her black hair falling loosely down her back and over her shoulders. Her lips brushed mine softly, almost like a caress, before pulling away slightly. My hands ran up her back, feeling every curve and muscle. I slid my fingers up to her shoulders, tugging gently at the thin strap of the small shirt she wore. With a slight sigh, Akeno let the shirt slide down her back, revealing her smooth skin and those huge, firm breasts covered only by a black bra. She looked at me with those deep eyes that said everything and nothing at the same time. Without wasting any time, I moved my hands to her breasts, pulling down the straps of her bra to reveal those striking pink slices. Gently, I grabbed each of her nipples with the tips of my index fingers and began to tease them, eliciting soft moans from her lips. Akeno, do you like that? Ah. Yes, I like that. My fingers continued to play with her nipples, squeezing and rolling them lightly between my fingertips. The sounds and sighs she made were like music echoing in my ears. Akeno tilted her head back and kept her eyes closed as she surrendered to the moment. Her body arched in pleasure, pressing her breasts against my hands with a hunger that only increased my own excitement. My lips formed a smile. I couldn't resist. I leaned forward and captured one of her nipples with my lips, sucking gently before lightly biting the tip. The moan that escaped her lips was like a prize and I continued, alternating between her breasts, sucking and licking, teasing her until she was writhing on top of me. Her moans grew louder, more desperate, and I knew I was driving her to the brink of madness. Leo. I need more. I lifted my head and looked at her with a mischievous smile as I continued to tease her. More? I asked in a playful tone. What do you want, Akeno? Fufu, I want you inside me. That's what you wanted to hear, right? She whispered with an evil smile. My whole body reacted to her words, and what was once just a desire turned into an urgent need. Akeno climbed on top of me and looked down at me with an expression of pure tenderness. Then she smiled and began to unbutton my shirt. When the shirt finally came off, Akeno ran her hands down my chest. Her eyes appreciated every detail. We're both ready for this, aren't we? She asked. We waited a long time. Much longer than we should have. Akeno smiled at me and agreed. My hands went down to her waist, feeling the softness of her skin. Carefully, I began to pull down her pants and panties, exposing her vagina. Akeno's breathing was fast and her eyes showed her excitement. She lay on top of me with her legs spread and her knees and arms resting on the sheet. Do you really want this position? It might be a little difficult, I warned her as she seemed to want to ride. If that was the case, she would have to swallow my cock completely and that might be a bit much for a virgin like her. She shook her head. Arera, are you worried about me, Leo? Don't worry. It'll be better this way because I can go at my own pace. So I positioned my cock under her vagina, feeling the moist warmth that welcomed me, but I didn't thrust. Akeno took my cock, placed it in the right place, and closed her eyes while her body shook slightly with pain as I slowly began to penetrate her. The feeling was indescribable to me and Akeno was so tight inside that she was pressing down on my cock from all sides. Are you okay? I asked, worried about her. I'm more than okay, Leo. I want more, a lot more. She opened her eyes, and at that moment I saw that something had changed in Akeno. She began to slowly walk up and down, and surprisingly, she increased her speed, as if the pain didn't bother her at all. With each descent, she took my cock deeper inside her. I could see the pleasure on her face and in her half-closed eyes as she kept a hand on one of her cheeks. Her vagina contracted and relaxed in a rhythm that drove me to the brink of madness. Each time Akeno came down, the pleasure I felt increased exponentially. My body reacted instinctively and my hips began to move to meet hers. Our fluids began to flow and mix, just as our sweat, produced by all the heat and effort, formed a thin layer on our skin that glistened in the soft light of the room. On. I could kill for this cock. Akeno said as she bounced her pussy on my cock, her movements accelerating. With each downstroke, she threw her head back and the sound of our bodies meeting echoed through the room, a symphony of pleasure that only the two of us could hear. What's more, my frequent thrusts made her moans louder, more urgent. Suddenly, I pulled her closer and increased the pace of my thrusts. Our bodies collided with an almost wild desire. Akeno responded with a deep moan and cried out. Harder, Leo. I didn't need any more encouragement. I grabbed her hips and began to thrust into her even harder. She began to ride even harder, her every move bringing us to a level of pleasure I had never experienced before. Are you still cold, Akeno? Not at all. Your dick is so hot. Heartsuit. Akeno was completely surrendered and her body responded to my every thrust. She, who had never felt the pleasure of a cock before, felt the ecstasy of sex for the first time and certainly didn't want to stop there. Akeno looked at me with a look of pure lust. Her hips kept moving, up and down in a frantic rhythm, while I matched each movement with firm thrusts. Leo. On. That's wonderful, she gasped between thrusts. Your cock is just right for me. I smiled, feeling sweat dripping down my forehead. Akeno, don't talk like that, otherwise, I won't last long. Then let's try something different. Without warning, Akeno pulled away slightly, causing me to come out of her. The emptiness I felt was almost painful, but the sight of her spinning around and positioning herself with her back to me made it all worthwhile. She rested her hands and knees on the bed and thrust her ass invitingly toward me. Her body was still shaking with excitement. Her vagina oozed a thick liquid. I want it like this now, Leo. She said with a mischievous smile, looking over her shoulder at me. I want to feel you go deeper. I moved behind her and grabbed her ass. The sight of her on her back like that made me even hornier. Gently, I began to penetrate her again, feeling the warm tightness of her insides squeezing around my cock. Akeno moaned loudly and thrust her hips against me, encouraging me to go deeper. That's it, Leo, more, more. I obeyed, increasing the pace of my thrusts, feeling every inch of my cock slide in and out of her. Ah! Yes, Leo. That's it. Faster now. Akeno screamed. Akeno thrust against me with the same fervor, her moans turning into screams of pure pleasure. Seeing Akeno writhing in pleasure before me was almost too much to bear. Holding her buttocks tightly, I continued to thrust my cock vigorously into her vagina. I'll never get tired of this. Leo, love, I can't get enough of you either. Please don't stop, don't stop. The sight of Akeno with her back to me, moving with such passion, was an image that would remain etched in my mind forever. Her skin glistened with a thin layer of sweat, and the sound of our bodies meeting echoed through the room, mixed with our moans. I decided to spice things up even more. I grabbed Akeno's waist with one hand while I slapped her ass with the other. Slap. The sound of the slap echoed through the room, and Akeno let out a scream of pleasure and arched her back even more. You like that, don't you, Akeno? That was me. Fufu, keep going. Leo, I want more of that. I loved it when you did that, make me feel more yours. Then I'll make you mine, all mine. I said as I slapped her ass again, this time harder. Slap. Akeno let out a loud groan. On. That's it. As I continued to penetrate her, I leaned forward and pressed my body against hers, grabbing her chin. This Akeno, this wild, lustful Akeno, only I know. I whispered into her ear, feeling her vagina clench with pleasure. And I'm going to make you all mine, with my cock. Akeno's response was a cry of pure pleasure, her hands gripping the sheets tightly as her hips moved wildly against me. My body was nearing its limit, but I wanted to prolong this moment as long as possible. Leo. Leo. On. I'm so close. Akeno was completely lost in pleasure, her eyes half closed in ecstasy, and that drove me on. I wanted to see her lose herself completely, I wanted to be the reason for her overwhelming pleasure. Suddenly I was pulling on her hair as if I were controlling the reins of a horse. She turned slightly and looked at me over her shoulder with a look of pure lust. Leo. I want all of you. Let it all out of me. Her words, charged with urgency and passion, pushed me over the edge. Leo, please, more. I'm almost there. And with one last strong movement, I felt that I was about to come as well. Akeno was so hot, too hot for anyone to last more than a few minutes without coming, and seeing her begging for my cum made my climax come even faster. Leo, inside me, now. Don't worry, we're devils, it's much harder for us to get pregnant. These words were the last thing I needed to hear. I allowed myself to be completely taken over by the wave of absolute ecstasy that washed over me as I released everything inside of her. Ah! Leo, I feel you so deeply, on heartsuit. Akeno, exhausted, rested her face on the sheet while her ass still stood up with my cock inside. I could feel the hot fluid dripping between us. Akeno looked up at me with a satisfied smile on her face. Irera, I told you we don't get pregnant easily, but with this much, you're definitely trying to get me pregnant, aren't you? Still trying to catch my breath, I said, yes, and that's why we'll continue to do it without a condom, right? As you wish, my master. Slowly I withdrew from her, and the wet sound of my cock leaving her body was countered by a short moan from her. Looking down at her, I saw her still trembling body and the white liquid dripping from her vagina. Akeno sat down on the bed and leaned towards me without wasting any time. Her eyes shone with a mischievous spark as she approached my still erect cock, now covered in our mixed fluids. Now, Leo, let me take care of you. Akeno said, grabbing the base of my cock. Is this the legendary cleaning blowjob? The guest room provided by Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka was permeated with the smell of sex, sweat, and lust that Akeno and I exuded. The curtains of the balcony swayed slightly in the night breeze, adding a coolness to the heat of our bodies. Akeno, sucking my cock with her wet tongue, picked up the pace, taking the head of my cock deep into her throat several times. Often she would look up, pleased just to see the pleasure on my face. You really like it when I do that, don't you? She murmured about her deep throat between licks. Yes, it's irresistible. I said with a little effort because of the pleasure she was giving me. Akeno learned things so easily that it was natural to think she had a natural talent for sex. She humped like nobody's business and tried hard to tame my cock with her mouth as well. When the pleasure of having my cock swallowed was almost too much to bear, I leaned forward a little, tangled my right hand in her hair and began to guide her to go even harder. Akeno got the message and began to devour my cock, at one point making it disappear completely in her mouth. Just as I was about to climax, she stopped and looked at me with a look of pure provocation. "Don't come yet, Leo. I want to enjoy every second with you." With a superhuman effort, I controlled my desire to release, concentrating on the sight of her, so devoted, so surrendered. Akeno went back to sucking me, his warm, wet mouth working in perfect harmony with his hands. The sensation was overwhelming, almost unbearable. I was about to lose control and she stopped again, stood up, and pushed me down so that I lay completely flat. Just like when she lost her virginity, she climbed on top of me and positioned my cock in her vagina. "Now Leo, I want to feel you release inside me again." I looked down at her pussy and could still see some of my cum dripping out. Was she saving it and wanted more? "Wait, Akeno, you have to." Without waiting for me to finish, she put my cock inside her and began to move, sitting slowly at first, her body undulating with an almost feline grace. Her sitting was now enough to make me come from the first second. She was hot, very hot. "Irera, were you going to say something, Leo?" "And no, just keep going," I ordered, leaving her to look at me with that expression of pleasure. "You're incredibly hot. Just for you, Leo. Only for you," she replied, her voice a lustful whisper. The sound of our bodies meeting filled the room, and the sensation of her sitting up brought me to the edge of pleasure. If I was about to come from her mouth alone, from her powerful thrusts, I was as hungry to come as a man lost in the desert for 7 days would be thirsty. "On! Leo Heartsuit!" Akeno moaned with her eyes closed and her mouth ajar in an expression of ecstasy. That moan motivated me. Motivated to see more of her, I let myself be taken over by the spirit of damnation and felt a wave of absolute pleasure wash over me as I released everything inside her. Akeno's body shook violently as she received my seed, and a hoarse cry escaped her lips as she too, climaxed from the heat of my cum. "On! My first cum shot Heartsuit! Yes, fill me up completely, Leo." We collapsed on the bed, panting. We were both much more sensitive. The feeling of being so connected was almost sublime. Akeno laid his head on my chest. "Leo, you make me feel so alive." "I've never felt like this with anyone before," I replied, stroking his hair. Sex with Akeno differed from what I had with Asia, because with her everything was wilder, more intense, more naughty, while with Asia it was more loving, simpler, and heartwarming. We stood there in silence, just enjoying each other's company. The mission we had in this place seemed irrelevant now. All that mattered was this moment with Akeno. As I felt his body relax on mine, I realized that I wanted more of this. I wanted to explore every facet of this uncontrollable desire for more sex. I knew that we couldn't stay there forever. There was a world out there, responsibilities, challenges. But for now, I allowed myself to lose the feeling of having Akeno in my arms, to feel her warm breasts and to see her tremble after coming twice. "Akeno. I want more. Are you ready for it?" She smiled, that smile that always lit up my world. "Do I want more? Get ready, Leo, for this was just the beginning. The night is very long, and this room is all ours tonight." The antique wall clock just struck midnight. 1 a.m. The soft moonlight illuminated the balcony, creating a seductive contrast to the darkness of the bedroom. The night breeze caressed our skin, bringing a coolness that contrasted with the heat of our bodies. Akeno pushed me against the balcony railing with a look of lust. Her eyes shone with desire. She wanted to do it here? On the balcony of a house we didn't even know? What if someone saw or heard us? Despite my many questions and fears, when she turned her back to me and flashed her inviting ass, the sight was so provocative that it instantly made me hard. Gently, I grabbed her hips with my hands and put my cock inside her. Her pussy was so wet that my cock slid in easily and Akeno let out a loud moan. I immediately started thrusting in a repetitive back and forth motion without stopping. My thrusts made her tremble, and seeing that, I increased the pace. "You like to be dominated, don't you?" I asked her, grabbing one of her breasts and squeezing it hard. This elicited a louder moan from her mouth. "Yes, I love it," she replied. "Harder. I want to feel more." Then I slammed my body against her several times and our movements became more frantic. Akeno arched her back and tilted her ass even more towards me. That huge ass could drive me crazy. "Yes, Leo, don't stop. On Heartsuit," she said as she put her hands on the ledge. Every thrust of my cock into her vagina was a shock of pleasure for both of us. Akeno rolled against me, adjusting her body to maximize penetration and pleasure. Our bodies were synchronized, in perfect harmony, and the balcony became our stage for unbridled lust. You're my whore, Akeno, I whispered in her ear. Yes, I'm your whore, all yours. Heartsuit. Akeno moaned loudly, throwing her head back in ecstasy. 2:24 a.m. Before we knew it, we were fucking long into the night and back in the bedroom. Suddenly, Akeno pushed me onto the bed with a sadistic smile on her lips. Now I want to be on top again, but first, she said, positioning herself on top of me. She moved down, her hot mouth wrapping around my cock again, sucking with an almost painful intensity. Fufu, you like to see me at your mercy, don't you? Yes, I love it. But I also like having you in control of me. Akeno picked up the tempo, her mouth and hands working in perfect harmony as if she were a professional flutist. Just as I was about to lose control, she stopped abruptly and climbed back on top of me. Let's see how much of my pussy you can take now, she said, guiding my cock inside her. She began to move with a predatory grace. She moved her hips up slowly, then down quickly, and continued to do so while moving her hips in a circular motion. Ha, that's good, very good. I murmured, lying on my back on the bed while she did most of the work. Arera. Heartsuit. She stared at me, paying attention to the grimaces I made to hold back my orgasm. She knew what she was doing, for sure. She had a natural talent for sex, and the lust inside her allowed her to recognize what I liked a little and what I liked a lot. I'm going to go harder, Leo, she said, leaning over my chest and starting to twerk on my penis, giving me such intense pleasure that I thought I'd be satisfied if I died like that. I couldn't tell if it was my demon lust or my very high attributes, but I wanted more of her. I wanted more of that pleasure. 3:11 a.m. Exhausted, we decided to go to the bathroom to take a shower. Akeno, always with her lusting eyes, positioned herself against the wall with her hands resting on the cold surface. Want another round, Leo? I grabbed her wrists and pinned her against the wall as I penetrated her hard. The sensation of being inside her again was almost unbearable and Akeno moaned loudly, her moans echoing in the closed, clear space of the guest room bathroom. Yes, Leo, fuck me harder, she begged. I picked up the pace, my thrusts getting faster and deeper. You like having me behind you, don't you? On. Yes, I love it. Because that way, you can fuck me hard. My ears turned red with embarrassment when I heard that. I gritted my teeth and slammed my hips against hers with a powerful thrust, shoving my cock in as deep as I could. Just then, I felt my cock hit something deep inside her and Akeno screamed. On. Leo, you reached my uterus with your cock. I knew it, you're amazing. I just need you. Just that giant cock to make me happy. Don't stop, please, don't stop. Akeno begged and stuck out her tongue. You're mine, Akeno. Yes. Fuck me like the whore I am. I complied with her request and began to thrust non-stop at an incredible speed. When we finally climaxed together, our moans mixed in the air with our panting breaths. We collapsed on the bathroom floor, exhausted. How many times was that? I asked. Arera, I lost count the 8th time you came inside me. With so much sex and horniness, Akeno and I completely lost track of where we were and what we were doing before we ended up in this room. When her breathing calmed down, the sweet scent emanating from her black hair was still present. We were lying on the bed with the sheets tangled around us and our clothes scattered on the floor. Soft moonlight filtered through the gaps in the balcony curtain. The silence of the early morning filled the room completely, making us miss the incessant sound of moaning from earlier. I stood up slowly, trying not to make too much noise. Akeno turned to me. Where are you going? She asked in a low, husky voice as she watched me pick up my pants. It's 4 in the morning. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka's book club party should be over by now, I replied, pulling on my pants and starting to put them on. I think it would be good for me to take a tour of the mansion, see how things are going. Let's not forget that this place is the target of a rebellious devil. Akeno sat down on the bed, the sheets slipping off to reveal her huge breasts. For a moment, I was tempted to throw myself down next to her, but I knew I had to be at least a little responsible, since I hadn't received any contract signatures yet, and Rias might get annoyed about that. All right, Leo, Akeno said, stretching out her arms and stretching slowly, a gesture that looked more like a deliberate provocation. Just come back quickly. I don't like to be left alone after a night like this. Fufu, it makes you look like an idiot. I felt a shiver run down my spine at the sight of her wicked smile. I leaned down and kissed her softly on the lips, feeling her sweetness. I promise I'll be back soon, I assured her before leaving the room. The Tanaka mansion was silent, the hallways empty and dark. As I left, I was still a little relaxed. I guess that was normal after coming so many times in a row. I went downstairs to the main hall where the party had probably taken place and where Akeno and I had been received. Traces of the party were everywhere in the mansion, empty glasses, plates left on the tables, and the faint smell of food still in the air. I walked past the huge stained glass windows, now reflecting the pale moonlight. Something about the stillness made me uneasy. As I left the room, the sounds of what Akeno and I had done still echoed in my mind, mixed with the image of Akeno stretched out on the bed. I had to finish this round soon to get back to her. Soon, I arrived at the hall where I had been greeted a few hours earlier. The place was empty, only traces of the party remained. There was no sign of Mr. or Mrs. Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka was a man of expensive tastes, as there were many bottles of sake with fancy labels. My eyes were naturally drawn to the row of glass alcoves along the walls, each softly lit by small lamps. I approached one of the alcoves and saw a sword. The blade of this sword shone in an almost hypnotic way. Beneath it was a nameplate, written in elegant calligraphy, describing the sword as an artifact of the Sengoku period. My poor, indebted nature in my world made me covet it immediately. Such ancient things from the past were completely lost in my world after the Great War. And it wasn't just the sword that was very expensive there. Every niche had something that made my eyes light up. Jewelry from ancient dynasties, scrolls with inscriptions in languages that have never been deciphered, and even a statue of a mythical creature that seemed to radiate an aura of power. I was impressed with the collection. Mr. Tanaka obviously had a good taste in rare and historical objects. As I analyzed the items, a question arose in my mind: what in this place could attract the attention of a rebellious devil? Of course, there were many potentially supernatural items, but I didn't feel any special aura from any of them. Besides, devils, including rebels, didn't need human wealth. They had their own ways of acquiring power and wealth, and it was often they who gave money to humans through soul contracts. My mind briefly wandered to the possibility of learning how to make such contracts. After all, getting someone's soul could give me a lot of power, especially now that I could get into trouble with the Phoenix. I just needed the right person to teach me. I sighed and moved away from the alcove. The Tanaka should be asleep by now and I wanted to get back to Akeno. I left the room, but then a strange sound broke the silence. I stopped and sharpened my ears. It was a faint sound coming from one of the corridors leading to the main hall. The sound led me to a room off the main hall, a room I hadn't been to before. The door to this room was ajar, and through the crack I could see an unusual glow. Slowly, I pushed open the door, careful not to make a sound. What I saw inside stunned me. On the floor in the center of the room, a portal pulsed with an intense light emanating from a magical circle. Its edges flickered as if made of pure fire, and a figure emerged from the portal. My heart raced when I saw this portal. The figure emerging from the magical portal was an old woman, hunched over by the weight of years. However, her eyes sparkled with a vitality that didn't match her frail appearance. She was dressed in formal attire, as if she had just left a ball. As she took her first steps, the wood of the floor creaked under her feet. But then something began to change. With each step she took, her figure changed. Her thinning grey hair began to darken, becoming a cascade of glossy black strands. The wrinkles on her face smoothed out until they disappeared completely, revealing pale, flawless skin. Her eyes became more penetrating, an intense yellow that seemed to burn with new fire. 2 cat ears protruded from her hair, perking up with attention. The formal clothes hugged her body, forming a black kimono like an outfit that exudes elegance. It was then that I realized that something was wrong, for I recognized her immediately. It was Kuruka Tujao. The initial shock almost paralyzed me. What was Kuruka doing here? Wasn't it too early for me to meet her? Did the Vala team act earlier because I killed Phoenix? I knew that my action would have consequences, but I didn't imagine that it would mean attracting the Vala Luficer and thus the Albion right now. I thought. I remained silent and peered through the crack in the door as Kuruka completely transformed before my eyes. The portal behind her disappeared as the light of the magic circle faded. She took a few steps forward, examining her surroundings with her alert eyes. I retreated further into the shadows, trying to make my presence as insignificant as possible, knowing that Kuruka knew Senjutsu and could somehow detect me. Kuruka let out a sigh of relief and started talking to herself. It was hard to spend hours talking about books just to get that magic portal circle in place, she said with a note of exasperation in her voice. But it was worth it. These people don't even know what's going on under their noses. I remained motionless, holding my breath to avoid being discovered. The mention of books reminded me of the book club party the Tanakas were having. That meant Kuruka had infiltrated that party, hiding behind the facade of a harmless guest, which explained the way she looked a few seconds ago. Her cunning was impressive. The room was completely silent in the early morning hours, only the occasional sound of the wooden floor creaking under Kuruka's careful footsteps. The atmosphere was tense for me, almost palpable as I struggled to remain invisible in the darkness. Kuruka walked slowly, examining every detail of her surroundings. I have to be careful, I thought, keeping my breathing as easy as possible. There was no room for mistakes. She stopped in front of a double wooden door carved with various details. It looked like the entrance to an important room. Without hesitation, she pushed the door open, revealing an immaculate room with glass cases displaying even more priceless artifacts than those in the main hall. Kuruka entered the room with the grace of a panther, her eyes quickly scanning the room before settling on one of the display cases. What was she looking for? What could be so important to justify such an act? Was she doing this for the Vala team or was she doing it on her own? Her eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she found what she was looking for, a small necklace-like amulet with precious stones. Ah, so that's what she wants. Kuruka raised one of her hands and her nails lengthened, sharp as blades. With surgical precision, she began to cut the glass of the shop window, delicately tracing a circle. The sound was barely audible, a slight scratch. The perfect circle she had cut shone briefly before it was permanently loose, and Kuruka carefully removed it, placing it on the niche without a sound. She reached through the hole she had made in the glass and her fingers were about to touch the amulet. Then I moved quickly, stepped out of the shadows and wrapped my left hand tightly around her neck. What do you think you're doing? I asked, holding her neck. She didn't answer right away. Her hand, on the verge of touching the amulet, hesitated before slowly pulling back. Kuruka didn't look scared, just curious and maybe a little annoyed. Who are you? I don't recognize your scent. You're not one of the humans here, and you're certainly no ordinary devil. That doesn't matter now. What matters is what you're doing here, Kuruka Tujao. You know that this city is Gremory territory, right? She raised an eyebrow, a small, enigmatic smile forming on her lips. Oh, you know me? That makes things more interesting. Kuruka tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. But I ask again, who are you? You don't look like one of Rias Gremory's pieces to me. She's the one doing the devil's work in this town, isn't she? You don't care who I am. I can see you're a hard nut to crack, but do you think brute force alone is enough to hold me? I squeezed her neck a little tighter, feeling her muscles contract under my fingers. Try something and see what happens. She was silent for a moment, just studying me. Then a slow smile formed on her lips. You're interesting, only I couldn't be less intimidated. Suddenly, I felt an intense pressure against my hand, as if something was holding back my strength. It was her Toki, a life force that made her stronger than usual. Before I could react, Kuruka moved with impressive speed, twisting and slipping out of my grip. Her feet landed softly on the ground after a frighteningly fast leap, while a white aura pulsed around her. Did you really think you could trap me like that? What would you do next? Call the police? What a naive devil. Kuruka flexed her fingers, and I realized how serious this was going to get. Now get out of my way so you don't get hurt. The artifact on your side is all I want. I raised my boosted hand and felt the familiar energy wrap around my arm. Don't underestimate what I can do. I won't let you walk out of here with that amulet. Kuruka's eyes narrowed as she recognized the boosted gear. This sacred gear is... So you're Leonard Tonalo. The devil everyone's been talking about. The first to kill a phoenix. Yes, I am. And I know that you work for the Vala team and that Vala Lucifer is acting sooner than expected because of what I did, I replied. Kuruka seemed surprised that I already knew about Vala Lucifer and that I already expected him to act. What puzzles me, though, is why you're trying to steal this amulet. It's not that important to Vala Lucifer, nor to the angels or the fallen angels. That's why it's in the house of a human. Kuruka let out a short laugh. This amulet is much more important than it seems. I stared at her, pondering her words. It was obvious that there was something else about this object, but I knew that it wasn't crucial to anything. All right. If the amulet is so important to you, we can make a deal. I'll let you go with it without having to fight me, but you'll owe me something. For a moment, Kuruka seemed to refuse. Her expression was one of mistrust and defiance, but something changed in her eyes. Perhaps she remembered what she had heard about my battle with Razor Phoenix. She knew that I was capable of a destructive power that could kill even an immortal being, and that wasn't something to be ignored. What's more, when I squeezed her neck, she felt how strong I was. And that was without using the boost. If I'd used several boosts, she would have lost for sure, even with Toki. She sighed, a resigned smile on her lips. Very well, Leonard Tonalo. I accept your agreement. However, I only do this because I want to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. I took a step back, allowing her to approach the amulet again. Just don't forget that you owe me now. And I'm going to collect. Kuruka carefully took the amulet and placed it between her large breasts in her kimono for safekeeping. Until next time, Leonard. I'm sure we'll meet again. She disappeared through the same magic circle that had appeared, leaving me alone in the room. Are you sure about what you just did, boy? Rias Gremory will be pissed when she finds out you willingly let a thief steal an item from one of her customers. I deliberately ignored the Red Dragon Empress question. Drake, you said that day that my destiny was to fight the Albion, right? Yes. That's the destiny of each of my hosts. That's why I let the girl go. Kuruka Tujao is the Konako's sister and she's part of the Albion host team, but she'll be mine one day. I want to take this piece and any other pieces away from Voluluficer so that he doesn't have a chance to act alone and become desperate. Boy, I like the way you think, but, how are you going to do all that? I don't know yet. Too many things can happen to get in my way, so it will be impossible to have a single concrete plan. What I can do is plant small seeds to reap the rewards later. So the fact that you left that woman was just so that she could help you in the future. How do you know she won't betray you? She works for Voluluficer, but there's nothing in the world she loves more than her sister. If I offer to reconcile with Konako in the future, Kuruka will accept. I turned my attention back to the now empty shop window and thought about what Kuruka had said. The amulet was more important than it seemed. That meant there was more at stake than I could see at this moment, maybe more than I could predict from my knowledge of the anime. From now on, I would have to be more vigilant, more prepared for whatever came next, and that included becoming stronger. My only combat skill at the moment was boosted gear, and when I had sex, I could use the system's abilities. I raised my right index finger, and a spark of lightning shot out from its tip. Just as I thought, the Predator's touch skill is working. The skill of Predator's touch has successfully copied electricity manipulation. You had sex with Akeno Himejima 14 times, so the skill electricity manipulation will last 7 days. You had sex with Akeno Himejima, and thanks to the skill Carnal Bond, you gained plus 10 strength points. You had sex with Akeno Himejima, and thanks to the skill Carnal Bond, you gained plus 10 dexterity points. You had sex with Akeno Himejima, and thanks to the skill Carnal Bond, you gained plus 10 constitution points. Asterisk. The next morning, Akeno and I were in the room of the Occult Research Club. Rias stood in front of us, her blue eyes sparkling with frustration and a minor disappointment. Next to her, Akeno maintained a calm expression, but her eyes showed a slight concern that we had failed. So, can anyone tell me what happened last night? How did a thief get in and out of the Tanaka mansion without you stopping it or even seeing it? Asked Rias. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka were having a little party for their book club. I began, choosing my words carefully. We weren't invited because apparently Mrs. Tanaka is afraid of us devils, so we ended up being kept in a room until the wee hours of the morning. When I finally realized that I could go out and look around, I realized that the amulet had been stolen, but it was too late. I didn't see anything else. Rias sighed and massaged her temples. And you didn't think at any point of just disobey the client's orders? And risk losing the contract by upsetting the client? I continued. They insisted that we stay in the room and not participate, and it became inconvenient to leave. By the time we realized the situation, it was too late. I understand. Rias said, her shoulders relaxing a little as she clasped her hands together. The important thing is that Mr. Tanaka is not angry. He has accepted the situation as her fault, and fortunately, we haven't lost the contract with him. She paused and looked directly at me. Akeno, could you give us a moment alone, please? I have to talk to Leonard about something serious. Akeno nodded and gave me a supportive look before leaving the room, closing the door quietly behind her. I stood there, waiting for what would come next. Is something wrong, Rias? She tucked a lock of her red hair behind her ear and looked down at her feet. Actually, there's something else I want to know. You and Akeno in the bedroom yesterday, did you do something? Actually, there's something else I want to know. You and Akeno in the room yesterday, did you do something? I felt the weight of Rias' gaze on me, but the way she looked at me was ambiguous. I couldn't tell if she already knew something and wanted my confirmation, or if she was just suspicious. My thoughts raced as I tried to formulate an answer that wouldn't give away too much, but wouldn't blatantly lie, either. After all, I didn't want to betray the trust she had placed in me. Rias, I started, hesitating. The memories of the night before were still fresh in my mind, the warmth of the moments with Akeno. But how could I explain this to Rias without sounding like a pervert guy? She looked up, her blue eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. Yes, she asked, urging me to continue. I took a deep breath, trying to buy time and organize my thoughts. Rias, I don't want to lie to you, Akeno and I. You don't have to say any more. Come closer, she ordered in an imperative tone. I swallowed and took a hesitant step towards her. Ria's expression was no longer ambiguous, but angry. Her eyes glared at me. She still wanted me to come closer? What was she planning? When I was only a few centimeters away, she raised her hand, and I braced myself for the impact of a possible slap or punch, but nothing came of it. Instead, she grabbed the back of my neck and pulled me down, placing my lips against hers. For a moment, I stood there with my eyes wide open and her lips pressed to mine, trying to comprehend what had happened. Her lips were soft, more than I remembered. A mixture of emotions ran through me, surprise, desire, guilt. All mixed together in a whirlwind as my hands automatically reacted and grabbed her waist. As our lips parted with a soft sucking sound, our eyes met. I was still very confused as to why she had done this, although she seemed annoyed. Rias, I started, but she raised her hand and put a finger on my lip, cutting me off. Don't say anything, Leonard. As much as it sounds like it, I'm not angry with you. I just want you to know that I don't care about competing with other girls for you. As long as you're here with me, that's all that matters. She said and started to turn her desk around. To be honest, some devils tend to have a strong sex desire. Her words echoed in my mind, each syllable deeply embedded. Ria's voice had a hypnotic cadence, and the way she pronounced strong sexual desire sent shivers down my spine. But there was something else in her expression, something that begged for a response from me. She was testing my limits. Rias, if you know that I have a strong sexual desire, then you also know that just kissing isn't enough for me. I said as I approached her, then grabbed her chin to make her look at me. Her eyes widened slightly with surprise and something else, desire, perhaps? Crossed her face for a brief moment before she regained her composure. Before she could answer, my hands slipped around her waist and gently lifted her. I sat her down on the table and felt her breathing quicken. Do you think you can make it? She didn't answer right away, but I could see the inner struggle in her eyes. Pride, desire, the need to maintain the pose of being my servant, all of it mixed together in a silent storm. I decided to test her limits a little further. With one swift movement, I lifted her by the waist and sat her on the club table. Leonard, what are you doing? She asked, her face flushed. I leaned over her, my hands firmly on her hips, holding her in place. Showing you what strong sexual desire really means, I replied, squatting down. When I reached the level of her hips, I slid my hands down her thighs, feeling the softness of her skin as I slowly parted her legs. She shivered at my touch and I smelled roses. Under her uniform skirt, I could see the red lace panties she was wearing. The visual was bewitching, a tantalizing invitation that she seemed unaware of. A mischievous smile played on my lips, knowing that the effect she had on me was undeniable and unmistakable. After all, she is Rias Gremory, my first crush. Leonard, that's... Rias held my hair. SHHH. I murmured as I pushed her panties aside. Just relax, Rias. Leonard, this is... Rias held my hair. SHHH. I mumbled as I pushed her panties aside. Just relax, Rias. As my fingers slid down the side of her panties, pushing the delicate fabric aside, I saw what I had only seen from a distance. The lips of her vagina were swollen and the intoxicating scent of her arousal filled my senses, making me even more lost in the moment. My tense breathing against her sensitive skin caused her to let out a soft moan as I inhaled. Leonard, don't do that. She pleaded, her face flushed with shame and her voice shaking. Still, I didn't stop. The fingers of her right hand grabbed my hair, but she didn't use enough force to push me away. So I ignored her protests, knowing that her body betrayed her words. As I held her panties aside with my left hand, my right hand touched the entrance to her pussy, and it was so wet that my middle finger slid easily inside. Her muscles contracted around my finger and an involuntary loud moan escaped her lips. At that moment, she herself was startled by how loud that moan was and put her right hand over her mouth to muffle it. Please. She said in a muffled voice, but her hips began to move slightly towards my touch, a silent confession of her desire. When she asked me to stop twice like that, I would normally stop, but at that moment, I received a notification from the system. You have received +1 heart from Rias Gremory. I don't want that. Rias continued. That's when I realized what kind of woman Rias Gremory was. Contrary to what I had expected, Rias Gremory was not the bossy or provocative type of woman, at least not her real face. She was the one who liked situations that were out of her control, perhaps because she was always in charge. Her understanding of Rias Gremory's character grew. If that's the case, I'll do my best. Determined, I finally took my mouth to her pussy, easily finding her swollen clit. I began to suck on it with a fervor that made her body shudder. On. Leonard. Rias' muffled moan surprised my ears, though I could barely hear her because her thighs were squeezing my head between her legs. Rias Gremory could no longer hide her pleasure. Her hand squeezed my hair tighter, and she pulled my head even closer to her vagina. My tongue explored every inch of the outside of her vagina while my middle finger slipped in and out of her pussy hole. Leonard, please, don't. Her voice was louder now, a desperate plea mixed with a request for more. Not here, in the club room, on my desk. Ria's moans grew louder and more uncontrollable, echoing off the walls of the club room. I knew that anyone passing by outside could hear it, but the advantage of having a building isolated from the rest of the QA Academy was precisely that there was no one around. Leonard. Leonard. She kept repeating, but the tone of her voice told me that she didn't want me to stop. Her eyes stared at me with a mixture of shame and desire, a combination I had never seen before in Rias Gremory. Her body heat increased, and I felt every tremor that ran through her legs. I wanted her to feel it all. I wanted every second of my mouth on her pussy to be etched in her memory and mine. My free hand moved up her thigh, squeezing the soft flesh as I felt the first signs of her climax approaching with the increasing rhythm of the tightening of her vaginal walls against my finger. Leonard. I can't, anymore. She gasped. Her body began to shake uncontrollably, and I knew she was about to come. All that mattered at that moment was to bring Rias to the climax of her pleasure. And then, with a loud, long moan, she came, her body convulsing as waves of pleasure washed over her. I continued to suck, prolonging her orgasm, savoring every reaction I was provoking. When she finally calmed down, I slowly withdrew my tongue and fingers, watching her face, flushed and satisfied. Rias was breathing heavily. Her breasts, compressed by her school uniform, moved up and down rapidly. She opened her eyes and looked at me. You were. She was about to admit it, but she puffed out her cheeks and turned away, her face still red. Forget it, that wouldn't be appropriate. I stood up, placed my hands on her thighs and approached her. Her eyebrows rose as my face approached hers, but all I did was whisper in her ear, you came even though you said you didn't want to. Ah, what an inappropriate attitude for a club president and direct descendant of the Gremory family. Admit it, it was good, wasn't it? That. She said, embarrassed. I walked away from her, leaving her sitting alone on the table with her legs spread and the fluid from her vagina dripping onto the floor. Anyway, I think that was enough to activate this. I said, looking down at my hand. The expression on Ria's face changed from cute anger to curiosity. She was serious when she asked. This. I turned back to her and looked into her eyes. Rias, I have a special ability, I finally admitted. An ability that I wanted to keep secret, but I don't think that would be fair to you and the others. This ability allows me to copy the abilities of the people I have sex with, of any kind. Her eyes widened more than ever. You, what? Exactly what I said. When I'm intimate with someone, I can copy a skill from that person. Prove it. She ordered. So I turned to her, opened my palm and a magic circle appeared in my right hand. Rias Gremory knew that I didn't know how to use magic because she hadn't trained me yet. However, her startled reaction wasn't because I was using a magic circle, but because this magic circle had the Gremory symbol on it. The only ability other than teleportation magic circles that bore that symbol was. That's the. I was about to say, but she answered for me. The power of destruction. My family's unique ability. Capable of destroying anything or any living being it hits. The crimson glow illuminated the room and was reflected in Rias Gremory's disbelieving and frightened eyes as she stared at the magic circle I had summoned. How? How did you do that, Leonard? I sighed, lowering my hand and letting the circle disappear. To be honest, I don't know exactly how. All I know is that this ability manifests itself almost every time I do something sexual. It's also something I'm still discovering. I lied to her. I didn't have to tell her all this, but it was beneficial for me in the long run, but that didn't mean I had to reveal everything. She crossed her arms, her expression becoming more serious. This is very unusual. The power of destruction is something that only members of my family possess, and you can use it without any difficulty. Is this an additional power granted by the Red Dragon Empress? I nodded immediately, looking serious. It looks like I'll have to investigate this further. I don't want to hide anything from you or the others. If this ability can be useful, then we need to know everything about it, I said. Rias nodded, still deep in thought. I will search for information in my family's library. Perhaps there are records of something similar in the incubus. Asterisk. In the days that followed, I continued my activities as a devil as usual, trying to get my first signature, but it was much harder than it seemed. Still, I didn't let my guard down for a second during those days. The White Dragon was in town, I knew it and Drake could sense it. My meeting with him was still a long way off, but considering that my decision to kill Razor Phoenix was big enough to change a lot of things, I couldn't hold on to my knowledge. I knew that the day would soon come when Kuaha City would be turned upside down by the presence of many powerful individuals, and the first sign of that day came that night. It was a cold, moonless night when Asia and I finished another job as demons, helping a client resolve his love problems with an ex-girlfriend. We were walking back to the club room when my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I quickly grabbed it as Ria's contact name flashed across the screen. Her voice sounded urgent on the other end. Leonard, I need you here immediately. Konako sensed an escaped devil. Meet me at the abandoned factory near the industrial park. Come quickly and bring Asia. At that moment, a scene flashed through my mind. I remembered the mission to the abandoned factory. Season 2, Episode 1. It seems that even with the big change I've made, there are canonical events that won't be changed. Without hesitation, I grabbed Asia's hand and we started running. Damn, I definitely need to ask Akeno or Rias to teach me how to use magic circles. After a few minutes of running, we finally spotted the factory. Its broken windows and graffitied walls stood out against the night sky. The place had an eerie aura, as if it held dark secrets in its dark bowels. Konako, Rias, Akeno, and Kiba were waiting for Asia and me near the entrance of the factory. Konako, what did you feel? Asia asked, holding her hands together. Konako turned her eyes in the direction of the factory. The putrid smell is strong here. There's definitely a devil on the run in there. And he's not alone. Rias stepped forward with folded arms. If the smell is strong enough for Konako to smell it even from this distance, we must be careful. Leonard, Konako, and Kiba, you go in. You're better at close combat. Akeno, Asia, and I will provide cover outside. We can't risk long-range magic in a confined space. I looked at Konako, who gave a confident nod in return, and then at Kiba, who had a lost look on his face as he stared at the broken windows of the place. So he's already acting like this. We're supposed to be friends, but I practically ignored him and missed the signs that this was so close. I, at least want to help him get revenge, I thought. So I turned to Akeno, Rias and Asia, trying to ignore the feeling that something strange was about to happen. We entered the factory with careful steps. The floor was littered with shards of glass and debris that crackled beneath our feet. The smell of rust and dust made the air stuffy and a little hard to breathe. On top of that, everything was so dark that most of the place was pitch black. Fortunately, the moonlight filtered into the factory through the broken windows and holes in the ceiling, probably caused by erosion from the rain. Let's keep an eye out, I whispered. I was a few centimeters ahead of them because Konako was the smallest and Kiba wasn't really here, at least not psychologically. Then suddenly, Konako stopped and raised her hand in a warning sign. They are close. She whispered, her eyes fixed on a door. Kiba and I exchanged a quick glance before we positioned ourselves next to the metal door. With a silent movement, Kiba pushed the door open, revealing an even darker room behind it. The atmosphere changed immediately, for surprisingly, there wasn't a large, disfigured creature with humanoid features in the room, as the escaped devils had appeared. In fact, what we saw were two hooded figures whose silhouettes stood out against the darkness. They immediately sensed our presence. One of them turned around with a smile on her face. Amen, the expected visitors have finally arrived, one of them said in a female voice that I immediately recognized from its animated tone. It was Irina Shido. Chapter 60, The Two Female Exorcists. The moonlight revealed the identities of the two hooded figures staring at us. Irina Shido, with her usual smile, was standing next to a girl with short blue hair and a serious expression, Zenovia Quarta. Amen, the expected visitors have finally arrived. Irina's voice was a strange mixture of joy and dissipation. Her smile contrasted with the seriousness of the atmosphere. The place was filled with tension, the silence broken only by the faint breathing of those present. The air smelled of rust and mildew, mixed with the foul odor Konako had mentioned, which even I could smell now. Our eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, and it was then that I noticed something behind the girls, the corpse of an escaped devil, lying in a pool of dark, viscous blood. Exorcists! What are you doing here? Konako asked in a serious tone as she noticed a cross necklace hanging from Irina's neck. Zenovia, next to Irina, remained motionless, but her blue-gray eyes watched us with an intensity that felt like a blade against my neck. On her back was a sword wrapped in ribbons. Irina exchanged a quick glance with Zenovia before answering. We took care of the problem because the devils in this city took too long. There was a slight provocation in her tone, but also an almost innocent sincerity. Private church business. Zenovia added in an unemotional tone. We only stayed here after we killed that devil because we knew they'd come sooner or later. We're just here to warn the devils in this town not to interfere with our work. Before I or the others could answer, a sound ripped through the air above us. I raised my head to see Rias Gremory slowly descending from the ceiling, her demonic wings beating softly. She entered through the broken window on the factory roof. Her presence was imposing, especially with her red hair and eyes. Rias landed gracefully between us and the church girls. You have no authority to be in demonic territory. Zenovia raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. Rias Gremory, Surtsk Satan's sister. We're not here to cause you any trouble. We even helped you. Rias crossed her arms and glared at them. You know very well that there are protocols to follow. Not long ago, we had to kill one of you. Are you talking about Fried Selzen? If so, don't worry. We received information some time ago that he was working with the fallen angels, so his death means that there's one less heretic in the world. Zenovia replied. Rias didn't look convinced. And why are you here? You should know that the presence of exorcists in demonic territory could be considered a threat to the peace treaty. We're here for the Excalibur swords. Irina revealed. Kiba's eyes widened. The Excalibur swords were fragments of an original sacred sword that possessed immense power and was then shattered into 7 pieces. The mere mention of it was enough to make Kiba almost trance-like with an obsession. Rias raised an eyebrow, curious. Go on. Zenovia began to explain. A few months ago, we received information that several fragments of the Excalibur swords had been stolen. Fallen angels are involved, and we believe they are planning something big. The church has traced their steps to this city, and our mission is to recover these fragments and prevent them from being used for evil purposes. Ria's expression softened a bit. And why exactly do you think these fragments are here, in Kuahu? Irina stepped forward. We have reliable information that one of the leaders of the fallen angels is hiding in this city, and that he has at least one Excalibur fragment with him. We are here to track him down and retrieve the fragment. Rias looked at them for a moment, pondering the information. One of the fallen angels' leaders is still here? Even after I killed one of their servants and threatened them with death? It must be someone powerful to have such courage. Rias thought. The expression on her face showed that she was seriously considering what had been said. So you're saying that the fallen angels are trying to collect the fragments of Excalibur for some purpose? Exactly, Zenovia confirmed. Among the fallen angels, there are those who prefer peace and those who do not. If they manage to gather all the fragments, they could unleash a devastating power that could upset the balance of power and end the current peace. We know that the Gremorists tend to favor peace, so we thought it best to inform them of our purpose in this city. I could see Ria's mind working quickly, weighing the risks and benefits. Finally, she sighed and nodded. Very well. I will allow you to continue your mission here. But you are still in my territory. Any suspicious movement and we'll deal with you the same way we dealt with Fried. Irina and Zenovia nodded and accepted the terms. Even they, who naturally despised the devils because they were church exorcists, understood that they couldn't fight someone like Rias Gremory. Understood. Come on, Irina. There's work to be done, Zenovia said and turned to leave through the back exit of the abandoned factory. Wait! Kiba suddenly shouted at the girls. The two exorcists turned around with surprise on their faces. Irina, still with a gleam of determination in her eyes, asked, "What is it, little devil? Do you have a fragment of Excalibur with you?" he asked, frowning at her. Irina opened her mouth to answer, and she probably would have been innocently sincere, but Zenovia quickly interrupted. "What if we do?" Zenovia asked. "What are you going to do?" Kiba clenched his fists, his eyes filled with anger. "I will have to take the fragments by force and destroy them." Zenovia remained serious as she turned towards the exit. "It seems that you, Rias, need to tame your dog better, so that he doesn't act without your permission. If he ends up dead one day, it won't be because of our carelessness." Realizing the risk of a confrontation, Rias took a step forward and pushed Kiba back. "Kiba, calm down," she ordered. "Let's let them work for now." Kiba's eyes went blank for a moment after Rias approached. Then he broke away from her, spread his devil wings and flew out of the abandoned factory.